In this video, I will be talking about the standards that I use when it comes to control room solution and control rooms design. Just before doing it, talking about the standards, it is very important for the plant or the company to identify the need. Why is the main reason that you are upgrading your control room? So as I said, upgrading or building a new control room is a complexity in itself, and then you have to address some of the aspects of the human factors in order to achieve a good result. One thing to keep in mind is that standards are only the minimum requirements for everything we build. How does it look around Europe and around the world? I'll talk about the Europe. You have ISO11064. It has become a main standard in Europe. At the same time, I just wanted to show you in this presentation that you have some countries that they use their own standards as well. For instance, in Norway you have NORSHOK S002, that of course also NORSHOK refers to ISO11064. You have EMUA in United Kingdom and Ireland, EMUA 201, that also refers to ISO11064. How does it look in United States? Yes, in United States United States is also using ISO11064. They do have some other standards as well. They do have ANSI HFS 100 2007. Other standard that they use mainly in the nuclear energy is the NUREG. NUREG is a pretty old standard, and it started with the Atomic Energy Act in 1946. All the other industries, such as process-based industries, transportation, mining and so on, they are more or less using ISO 11064. And why is this standard the best one that I think in this field? It's because of the design process that we have on the part 1. On the part 2 of this standard, you have principles for the design of the control suite itself, where you have the recommendation about the location and what you should think about it. On the part 3 of this standard, you have the control room layout that mainly gives you recommendations for the control room itself. Gives you recommendation on entrances, exits, if you're going to have a future expansion, a recommendation on the communication itself, if it is internal between the operators and shift supervisors and maintenance, and all the communication that occurs inside the control room between the operators. Part 4 is the layout and dimension of the control station, and this has to do only with the workstation itself and everything that is included in that workstation. On the part 5, you have the displays and controls, as we call it, human-machine interaction or human-machine interface. And in this part, you do have some recommendation about the symbols that you're going to use, how to place the alarm management in those human-machine interfaces, and so on. On the part 6, we have environmental requirements for control room, and here you have lighting recommendations, acoustic recommendation, vibration, air quality, and so on and so forth. And here we go, last but not least, we have the part 7, which is the validation and verification process. This is, in my point of view, very important part of the ISO 11064 that not unfortunately always is used after building a control room or control center. Some countries do use some other standards or methodologies as well. For instance, in Nordic countries you have a CRIOP methodology. It's very much used, and that CRIOP methodology is scenario-based methodology that you verify and validate the criteria of the control room that you have built. And what is the difference between control center, control room, and control suite? You do have the definitions, the definition in this standard. And when it is a control center, you have a subsystems, you have facilities nearby, and then you have a control room itself. Control suite, it's simply the facilities, and the control room itself, I mean facilities nearby the control room. And then you have a control room itself. And here we go to the best part of it, which I think it's in this ISO 11064, in this standard. First of all, we have to understand that standard is divided in two main areas. You have the recommendations and you have the design process of it. Back to the design process, I think it's a wonderful design process that distinguishes this standard with all other standards out there. And first of all, applying this standard, you create a multidisciplinary team or design team that works with the control room upgrade. And why is this important? Because this standard ensures the participation of end users throughout the design process. That's why I think this standard is very, very good. And how does this standard look like? It has 5 different phases. It has a clarification phase, analysis phase, conceptual design, detailed design, and iteration or a feedback process. On the clarification phase, you usually gather the data, and this often you do by going on site, visiting the control room, observing the control room, and using data gathering methods such as workshops, focus groups, interviews, mail, Microsoft Teams, and so on and so forth. And you sit together with operators in order to see what is the current situation on the control room and how could we improve. But the main focus should be on gathering the data, not making analysis. So this is mainly, this phase is focused on the data gathering, not on the other steps. When you gather the data, you go into the next level or next phase of the design process, and that is analysis. You gather the data, you do analysis on the data that you have gathered, and then you address all the standards that you are working with. In my case, often with the ISO11064. See the guidelines that the company has, because sometimes you have guidelines as well inside the company that you have to fulfill. See the recommendations that may have. You have to talk with unions and all the personnel that do have recommendations for the upcoming upgrade. So it's very good to address those recommendations as well. And then when you have analyzed this kind of data, you go into the third phase, that is a conceptual design. And in conceptual design, you create a prototype from the data that you have gathered and the analysis that you have done. And this prototype you show to the customers from the different, you can use 2D graphics or 3D graphics or AR or VAR format or whatever it is. And then you go through the iteration process together with the end user in order to tweak this design and create a detailed design that is a final design for that upgrade that you are going to do. And throughout all of these phases, you have iteration process or iteration phase. And that's why I think this standard is very, very good, because it involves all the end users, and at the same time on the analysis phase you have to use the recommendations that are part of this standard as well. And this is the main reason why I think this standard is very, very good comparing to all other standards. Here we're going to talk about the industrial trends that we have today. Here you have the operator operating the plant, near the plant, and here they gather a lot of tacit knowledge and information about the plant itself. They know more or less everything that is going on the plant. And today, thanks to the Industry 4.0 or Internet of Things, you have possibility to run the processes remotely. You don't have to be nearby process itself, as you can see it here. You can run processes remotely in a collaboration center or a remote center. But at the same time, you should identify the risks so you don't build the latent risks on the control center, and you can avoid that by identifying the functions, to see what are the critical functions that you have to address, and make a risk assessment and see the impact of it, and how you should solve those problems that may occur if you're sitting at the control center, because you are not going to be near the process, and you are not going to have the tacit knowledge, in form of the sound, in form of the smell, or a vibration near the process that you usually have. So back to the ISO, yes, I do think that this is the best standard, and this is the standard that I mostly use in a control room design, control room solutions, and I think it covers everything. That's why I think this standard is very good, as I went through it, each part of it in the previous slides. I think that if you are going to use this standard, it's well enough for most of the control rooms upgrade that I have seen out there, and it's often more than enough. Sometimes it's too big, but at least you can cherry pick whatever you need from this standard. One thing that you should think about it, as I said earlier in the beginning, is that often I have seen industrial companies focusing on the control room design, which is it's very good, but control room design should be the end of the process, not the beginning of the process. That some companies have done it and they end up with a beautiful control room, but beautiful is not always functional. And you have to keep in mind that there is more to the control room solutions than only control rooms design. You have HMI, you have alarm management, you have risk assessment. If you identify the functions that are fulfilled with the risks, then you have to do a risk assessment and see the impact of it. You have to conduct or perform function and task analysis, see the workload and workflow, and so on and so forth. So don't end up just doing a control room design. You need, prior to that, you need all other fields, as well as you have HMI and alarm management and all of these fields that you are seeing here. And first of all, as I said, whatever you do on upgrading the control room, control center, or control suite, or building a new one, you have to identify the need. What is the need? Is it to upgrade the level of automation level? Is it that you want to attract the young generation, or is it that you want to centralize several control rooms to one control center? And whatever you do, keep in mind that health and safety is the objective when upgrading the control room or control center or control suite. Since this objective is to design adequate working conditions with regard to human safety, health and well-being. This is very important, because ending up with any accident, it's not fun at all, and the result could be devastating. Last but not least, beautiful, it's not functional, and this is why I'm repeating it, since I have seen beautiful control rooms that simply were not functional. I mean, so be aware of it. Do not end up with a beautiful design, but try to achieve a functional and beautiful design as well. And this you can do by applying human factors aspects during the upgrade of your control room, control suite, or a control center. Hi again. This was all that I wanted to show to you today regarding the standards to use in control room solution. I know that there is more, and if you have any questions, or you are thinking to upgrade your control room or control center or a control suite, please do not hesitate to contact me. You have the information on the screen, and of course, I'll help you as much as I can. Stay tuned, because from time to time, I will release this kind of videos regarding the control room solution and control rooms design. Thank you very much.